Oh, good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you may happen to be. Welcome to another scene in Death of a Dark Crusade Season 2. On this merry evening, as the city slowly recuperates from a crippling epidemic that still persists, albeit is now significantly contained and winding down. He said it in the Southwall slums. The, well, effective domain of the Malkavians. Technically former, considering the lack of a prince. As there is a gathering of a recent, a rising trend, movement of flagellants, or the Ordo flagellum, as they call themselves. There's a gathering where they are recruiting and discussing and sharing in their insights and their pilgrimage and their revelations. And not too far away, there is a Malkavian who has taken it upon himself to investigate this group due to its a sudden surge in popularity and slightly shall we say veiled intentions after his ally returned troubled and not a little bit too mortificated.
So yeah, before Garnet will approach, the first thing he will do to keep himself completely hidden is I will attempt to use Obfuscate 3 to disguise myself. I will suspend the blood and his manipulation performance, I believe. Difficulty 7, I think, if I'm correct.
This is for Obfuscate. Sorry, do you say Obfuscate 3?
Obfuscate 3, yes.
Yeah. I think it's Div 7. Shut up, Foxit. Difficulty 7, yeah, and basically the success, the amount of, it's basically a success threshold determines how
effectively I change
how effective your mask is. Yeah.
Cool. I'll roll that now. I got 1 success.
One success. So your mass remains largely the same. You're not really any taller or shorter than you were before.
Mm-hmm.
And it's difficult for you to change your features, although you may change your face enough so as to be difficult to recognize.
Yeah.
Consider it very much like you look like your own older brother or cousin or something.
Yeah, he'd be dressed in kind of clothes that would fit the slums as well, very hand-me-down clothes, nasty appearance as well, so he wouldn't be kind of standing out. So yeah, some minor alterations is fine, as he'll approach, cautiously, but, carefully, keeping his head down, but then, again, looking around, seeing what he can see of the people there in the slums, and or best to start his investigation.
Yeah, so, the gathering itself is largely being held outside in an open area. Let's get a map up. So it's it's kind of just somewhat northwest of the center of the slums. still fairly open, but out of the way enough that guards at the gates or anything aren't gonna, or in the center of the slums aren't going to pay it too much attention. Attention,
All right.
as they are, while they are considered fairly harmless, they are still somewhat uh, a militant group.
Mm. All right.
And it's kind of a large open area, but the gathering itself does kind of spill over into a few kind of alleyways, and I guess what you could consider some like not back gardens, but kind of small like almost like small open 10 by 10 like walled areas,
Mm.
which like yeah could maybe pass for like some gardens if they were ever maintained, but
Ah, yeah.
it's a bit of grass and overgrowth and mud largely, where people kind of sit, chat, and like have a bit more privacy. And there's a fair bit of chatter going on. It's actually not too loud.
Mm.
Um, there is the you do hear kind of as you approach from like 100 meters or so away, like a crack of that whip. Um, it's perhaps the only sound that kind of pierces the air, but it's not frequent or reoccurring.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It just ever
It's
happens every now and
it
again,
just
type of
it
thing.
just kind of it happens. Yeah, it kind of happens on approach. Like as you were obfuscating, it happened like a few minutes prior.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he'll move up, probably sticking close to those kind of miniature gaps and all that, kind of keenly listening into what people are talking about, getting the general sense of the place, and seeing if he can identify probably where that whip exactly, the crack of the whip exactly is coming from as he pushes further in.
Okay, so 1 minute. Um, for the most part, they are largely discussing uh, the suffering of Christ.
Mm.
Obviously, very much in the weeks and months leading up to his crucifixion, the actual conviction, and his crucifixion and subsequent resurrection. Um, and how that can make them as a people stronger, and how they can emulate his suffering as a purging of sin.
Mm.
That as Christ died for everybody's sins, that they too may emulate that in some small way, so that they might suffer, so that their family might not, that they might purge this community, its city, of its sin, that they may redeem it in the eyes of God, that they may redeem themselves.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I get you.
And how that pain makes them better as people, and there is a little bit of morbid discussion into what that necessarily entails and how far they need to go, and what kind of suffering is more act. Must they is simply lashing each other enough? Must they emulate the crucifixion itself? Is fire a more appropriate purging of of their own flaws, and more appropriate in the eyes of God? There is that sort of surprisingly philosophical debate. It's for a group of fairly uneducated common folk.
Mm.
It is an actual. There's quite a lot of contemplative discussion about the nature of their suffering and what that means for them. Nothing that particularly stands out other than that focus.
Okay. And is there any talk as he pushes further in? This is surprised by how philosophical it is from common folk. But is there any talk of people who would be offering such things like the cult itself? Are they kind of spread out among the people, or is this an initiative people are taking up on their own? Is what Garnet's looking for? A kind of central figure, that type of thing, among the crowd.
It appears to be a largely leaderless movement, from what you can tell. It has, because of its recency, there hasn't really been time to. There aren't any senior figures that would kind of prop up from these movements. Like, no, there is no an old flagellant or anything like that. But it's more of a community movement. And people tend to seemingly recruit individually. There are people who seem to be more respected than others. Like there are, I hesitate to call them leaders, but more respected figures. Again, not seniors, but perhaps it's just people who are just more assertive and militant, and because they are
more shining examples, you would say.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, because of that more militant and a more fundamentalist attitude, they tend to have a bit more like their voices tend to be heard above others.
Yeah.
There are several of these people. They don't necessarily seem all that interconnected with each other. They all know each other. Everyone in the community seems to be on good terms with each other. They're all kind of abound in their own suffering together. There doesn't appear to be any particular amount of infighting from what you can tell.
And the entire community seems to be rallying at this. Garnet's also got, as he's watching the crowd too, and say, are there anyone opposing this, or anyone that looks kind of slightly disturbed by this behavior, or does this entire community seem to just be rapidly supporting it?
The people in the area, there's no one in the crowd itself who seems to be speaking out. There are people who seem a bit more reticent than others. But ultimately, if nothing else, is certainly not speaking out. They are complicit, if not openly supportive.
Okay. So these kind of more exemplary figures of this cult. Is there anyone that's kind of standing off on its own, or are they all kind of group talking to people or anything like that? Because that's Garnet's looking to maybe converse with one of them and get the general gist of the militancy.
There are a few people off on their own, actually. Kind of, again, often like one of those little kind of tucked between an alley. There's a small little an area large enough that where there's about half a dozen people. The one guy, to give you a picture of it.
Okay.
It's about half a dozen people, and there's about 4 people kind of on their knees, and they're being lashed by the other 2 who are standing up, and seem largely detached from the other discussions and talking, and seem much more like these words are pointless. That actions are what matter. We can speak of our convictions, or we can act upon them. Every moment wasted is every moment spent talking is a moment that could be spent redeeming oneself in the eyes of God.
Yes. Okay. So Garnet will
one of the more militant figures.
Yeah, definitely. Garnet will approach very cautiously, not wanting to interrupt or attract an ire, and will kind of lean against the wooden post, kind of watching, waiting to see if one of the militant figures takes notice of him, kind of watching.
Yeah. Are you obfuscate 2 right now, or are you?
I'm obfuscate 3. I'm just using my disguise. I'm not trying to hide myself.
It takes him a little bit. He's very wrapped up in what's happening. And you are dressed a little bit differently from the people here. I mean, practically, but a lot of the people here are have very loose clothing due to the nature of what they do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Some of them are literally in rags, seem to have taken an oath of poverty, or seemingly alongside their own, or just are in poverty, but alongside their own kind of flagellantism. Um, but after a little bit, he will kind of notice you. He won't walk up to you. But after a while, particularly when the people being lashed begin to falter a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
like there isn't, it's not silent. There are kind of yelps and groans of pain as they're lashed, and you do see a bit of bleeding and very heavy bruising. These people's backs are just horribly.
Yeah, I imagine they're like, yeah, Jesus.
Dozens of lacerations. Yeah, just completely covered in
Yeah,
marks and bruises and scars, and
yeah, Jesus.
Even their arms, like where the whip was perhaps just not struck correctly, their shoulders, the lower parts of the neck, the faces are largely clean. One guy seems to have a scar on his face, but doesn't seem like it was caused by a whip, probably from some prior encounter.
Yeah.
And I guess what you could consider his earlier life.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Should be noted, I use the word he a lot. There are women here too doing the same thing.
Yes.
And are not equal in number, but it's a surprisingly even divide. Like,
Okay.
like 60, 40, 55, 45.
Okay.
Again,
Yeah.
It's kind of like, it is a very it's as much communal as it is religious.
Yeah. It definitely seems to be included into the community. Okay, that's perfect.
He doesn't walk up to you quite yet. He just seems to notice you and seems to see you observing, and just kind of nods to you as if acknowledging you, and how to say, encouraging you to observe.
You step forward very calmly, and will smile and bow again, very polite. Forgive me for staring. I'm new, and I'm trying to understand more that I am faithful to the Lord. It's more I do not understand the ideals. He'll just smile of the movement that's been going around the community. He'll smile very politely again.
As he will briefly stop and turn to face you as you are now addressing him, and it looks like his fellows can't really take much more. Character is built over time, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
He I understand how this may look. But our credo is founded upon our own suffering. I understand that many have taken to their homes. I am pleased, however, that you have decided to remain and observe.
I feel it's better to understand and to also respect and also gain knowledge from people who are willing to share it and display it so openly. It would be remiss of me not to.
Wise words.
Garnet will
Although,
just incline his head.
although we find insights are best uncovered through the embracing of our penance rather than the inflicting of it.
You'll nod. I see.
What is it that you would like to know?
When did this belief and when did this begin for you? When did you realize that you were right in following this path? When did your mind open up to this? I'm more curious at that. What gave you the goal to drive for this?
Myself? Well, like many of us here in Odessa, the words and convictions of the good Father Peter Damien did not reach us until recently. Perhaps that is why, because of our lateness in discovering his teachings, that God's wrath strode through this town unchecked for so long. I first heard about it through some of the even less fortunate of these streets. It began with the homeless, you see, although I suppose that makes sense. They tend to travel because of their lack of homesteading. And they see in him much many would miss. I can only assume that they heard the words of Peter Damien from other travellers, and then began speaking and partaking of it themselves.
Peter Damien, you said.
Can you roll? Do you have theology Christianity?
Let me just double check for you. No, I do not.
Okay, so you can't make this roll. Yeah, you don't know who Peter Damien is. That's a name.
Yes.
Yes, long since past. God rest his soul, no doubt that it does.
Just nod slowly.
He was the first to discover the merits of purging one's own skin through the mortification of the flesh. Surprisingly simple discovery in hindsight, just as Christ suffered, so must we. And yet so many of us casually disregard this. Believe that we can simply walk into heaven untouched, unblemished, without trial, without test.
Just nod slowly.
And so we work to hone ourselves against some temptations of evil. And aid each other, our communities. Just that, as in how Christ died for our sins, perhaps our own suffering might contribute in such a insignificant way, and perhaps because of our suffering, families might suffer ever so slightly less for it.
Nod again. It's respectable. It's a respectable goal.
I would hope. These mark and he kind of points to one of the lads, to be a fairly young man, maybe 20, 19, 21. Just kind of has been recovering from his lashings. These marks are not the products of a sadist or a fool. Or even a noble. They are
Really,
representative of the trials of simple and honest men trying to better themselves before the Holy Spirit.
you just nod.
That we might spare ourselves and this entire city, which we are uh, far away from such a goal. Too many spring from suffering as if they were a hare eyeing a fox. They see it as something to be avoided when it is something to be faced and learned from.
I'm not. I can understand it, and I respect the fact that you are not obviously here for simple pleasures of perverse needs, that it is more of dedication and trial and error than anything. Did this start as a community group, or was there a person who you all learned the teachings from, or did this ideology come from uh, talk amongst yourselves as equals?
I don't recall any singular individuals, although the homos did speak of the one who first imparted the seeds of knowledge within them. It was during the worst nights of the plague, I believe.
Jerome, it was just nod. Hmm. And have you had much trouble among the community itself, or do you find that most people are quite welcoming towards you and your ideals?
We seek to cause no harm. I wish more understood this. We are fairly safe. We tend to stay out of the areas where we are not welcome. Obviously, the Saracens are not as forthcoming as we, but we accept this. It is not their way, and we shall see who is correct in the end.
Surprising. I mean no offense when I say it, most of us can be quite militant in our beliefs towards the Saracens. It's a surprising attitude to see.
What fear is there to have of death when paradise awaits you on the other end? So long as we act right and proper in this life, surely we will be rewarded in the next.
Just nods.
If I may ask, would you be interested in joining us? Of course, we would not dare force you. We won't.
The idea is interesting, however, I am a man that respects all knowledge and things before stepping into something. Although I will not say the idea is not an appealing one, I would like to know first. To know is to understand, and how can I apply myself and give faith if I give it through ignorance rather than through knowledge and the full side of me?
He seems to weigh your words fairly carefully. Because that was effectively a very long-winded and polite rejection.
Yeah, exactly.
um, he accepts this. He as he said, he would not force you. Of course, we want people who truly believe in our cause. For if we do not, then, as you implied, we would be nothing more than simple sadists and monsters.
Exactly, and you do not strike me as such. You strike me as quite philosophical, if anything.
Not all of us are,
Just nod.
but we are all committed to our purpose. There are a few seniors among us. We are a young movement here. I take it you wish to find the individual that was perhaps the one who passed on this knowledge to begin with. I noticed you've asked about them several times now.
Garnet will nod. Sometimes it's better to understand, I feel, from the central figure. Perhaps they have often the most keener insight. I don't mean offense to yourself, but it's often best to ask and then find the person who started it all, and perhaps once you have the whole picture, it is easier to you dip your hands in the water.
Hmm. I would not consider any among us here central. There are no leaders among us, and I've not seen or heard of the individual that started this movement, although I would be deeply honored to meet them. No, the homeless of the city spoke of a woman with long black flowing hair who offered them sanctuary or respite. An interesting contradiction, given what we have, or given what we are. I believe they were very skeptical at first, as such demanded things in exchange. Food and drink, shelter, this sort of thing, not understanding the truth of her message.
Hmm.
I'll be right back, I apologize. Hello again. Apologies.
Hello.
Yes, I believe you're about to reply to the man.
What was the question you said? Sorry, you kind of broke up during it.
No, I believe he talked about the individual that like who the homeless spoke of. It was a woman of long black flowing hair.
Yes, yes.
Gave some of the homeless respite during the worst nights of the plague.
Yeah, that was it. Yes, that was it.
Which he considers very ironic. I mean, as you walked through the area, like there were people like giving each other food and drink. Like they do seem to sustain each other, and it's not just like a pain fest. Like they do seem to legitimately care about each other.
Yeah, yeah.
So there is respite that they're given. Yeah, I think that was more or less the entirety of what he said.
Okay.
He also says he's never met her, and he doesn't know like who in particular has met her.
And you just nod at that. And he will just simply nod and, well, I thank you for your time, and it was most insightful. I'm sure you'll see me again. Garnet will offer a very genuine smile.
He'll just nod. Good evening to you, friend. I hope. Yes, I hope I do see you again. Perhaps next time as a fellow brother.
Garnet will just nod politely and make his way back to the crowd, just taking a more look and even asking some passers-by every now and again the mention of the black-haired woman. Have they seen a woman matching that around the place? Or when was the last time they saw someone that handing out food or anything like that? They just do that kind of sweep around.
Well, I mean, you do see like a few black-haired women. Most of the people. So you see, for example, you see a few women fitting a rather vague description you're given. And secondly, a lot of the people you actually ask around don't really seem to have heard of her. Like, is there anyone like you're asking in particular? Like,
He might go up to one of the more militant ones and maybe ask one of them, but he would be kind of asking the people that would, for example, have their own blankets and food as well. Maybe he might, by chance, bump into one of them that was given to her by her, but he'll be kind of asking that sort of general direction.
Okay. So sorry, you said you wanted to. So when it comes to blankets,
Yeah, he will ask a general crowd of them, saying like, he would just ask general questions like, have you been here long, and have you been able to keep warm yourselves, or are there people handing out blankets and all that type of general question, and seemed quite curious and concerned and all that type of thing.
So yeah, most people haven't really heard of them. Some of the more militant fellows, even some of the more militant fellows haven't. Although some of most of the I guess what amounts to senior figures, again, there really aren't any because it's such a young movement. But those that are stuck around seem to be aware of the sort of urban myth that she is, and that seems to be what it is in a lot of ways. Like it's more like a rumor than a hard fact, even though that was kind of how it was stated to you by this particular by that particular militant. He seems most of them refer to her as a rumor. As for like the people handing stuff out, they don't really seem to know too much. But the people being handed stuff, there are a few vagrants in the area who are a part of this movement. In fact, a lot of homeless are a part of this movement because what do you have to lose, really? As you kind of go perusing around, you do definitely end up gathering attention. But as you kind of perusing around, can you roll me perception awareness real quick?
Yes, I can. Depending on the diff, 2 successes. 9 and a 7.
Okay, that's really all you need. You feel it's difficult to describe. In the sort of in the hustle and bustle of this gathering, and in the midst of the sort of the chaos of what is your life, your mind. Um, Most of the time it's just noise, right? Um, like the physical and the mental, literally what you hear, it's just nonsense and not relevant to what you're doing. But there have been moments where like it's like a finger snapping in your head. Um, it's you feel something of a connection, and over the many decades that you've been around, over the century and half, um, you've kind of managed to piece together what that means. I mean, it means a lot of different things at a lot of different times. But one of the more common aspects of it is it means the presence of a fellow lunatic, a fellow Malkavian is nearby, or maybe is trying to tell you something, or is telling you something, or maybe just told you something.
Okay.
Um, However, in this case, it's a bit more obvious.
Right. That general feeling, is it coming from anywhere, like any direction, or is it just this kind of general sense of something I can feel in me, or is it kind of any particular direction I can feel it from?
You feel it pulling in a fairly specific direction. In fact, you see him. Um, he's just kind of um, sitting there with a blanket. Um, um, with albeit not in his usual state, not covered in blood, rather it's just a vagrant.
Huh.
He's just sitting there with a blanket and has sort of put the food and water to one side.
Garnet will raise a surprised eyebrow and will make his way over cautiously.
Um, yeah, just sitting. He just sits there. He sees you on approach. Um, he's wearing nothing other than like rags for modesty. Um, he kind of has a small blanket, some cheap woolen blanket, maybe. Um, but yeah, uh, he sees you on approach. He doesn't really respond to you all that much. He seems oddly detached from the rest of this gathering. Like you notice kind of as you walk towards him, no one else has actually come anywhere near him. Like it's almost oddly shaped as well. It's almost like imagine him being up against a wall, a semicircle, like this literal radius of inactivity around him.
That is odd. So Garnet will approach very cautiously, very slowly, and will say very politely, "Might I sit down beside you?"
His head shakes and he blinks rapidly for a moment as if he's even though like he was literally looking at you, it's almost like he's noticing you again. Um he just kind of tugs like on the blanket, and he just says, not large enough for two.
Oh, well. You just kind of just nod and smile. Might I converse with you then, if you are not busy?
Okay.
They say we hear a song every now and again. Sometimes it's beautiful, sometimes it's sad, but so many voices in different places. Do you hear the same thing I hear?
I've heard better.
Depends on the song, really. Garnet smiled good naturedly. But I'm surprised that another one is here. Even though, well, I'm not surprised, but. It seems we're drawn to a place like this.
I suppose. If you like the blanket.
That's true. Or if you're into the look around, maintaining your faith.
He he looks out into the crowd. Um, Not if you don't know who you worship.
It's a fair point. And who do you think these people worship then? Or what is making them worship in such a way?
He uh, he kind of tilts his head, and it's in a way that he looks fairly quizzical, but at the same time, he looks like he's looking past you. Um, but he'll he comes across as either very forward or very distracted, and he'll just say, "Same person that's been here for the past century."
You raised an eyebrow. For the past century, you say?
Think that is 100, yes.
Nod. They've been here for 100 years. In this city.
When were they last here? A few months ago. He kind of mutters to himself a little bit, as if he's kind of trying to figure out some sort of internal enigma before continuing. Well, she lives next door now. And here.
Hmm. What's her name?
He thinks really hard on this. I can't hear every music. He kind of looks out into the crowd very plainly. It's far too loud here.
Not.
It's really not that loud here.
Garnet, yeah, it's. I imagine his ear quietly goes as far too out here. Garnet just nods like, "No, I get it. I get it instantly." You know what I mean? That type of stare, like, "I know the feel, bro." You know, that's as he looks out. What sort of music's playing for you?
It's just sounds.
Just nod. Sounds.
You don't belong here.
I can't say I do. I normally like to spend with the horses. It's not so loud with the horses.
You don't worship those either.
No, I don't worship the horses. You smile. I train them, I teach them, and I take care of them. Like any good horse master would.
Like these people, then?
In a way, yeah. I suppose everyone has their own version of a master, really. Or they like to think they do. For these people, at least. Did you see a woman with black hair, quite beautiful, handing out blankets, by the way?
There's a lot of them.
But this one is... You smile. This is one that has been wandering around the many meetings of the small folk. It's a particular woman I'm looking for, unfortunately. You look around, just staring at the crowd.
Not here right now. Too busy making monsters, I think.
Eyebrow raise. Making monsters. What monsters does she make, I wonder? He smiled to himself.
The same one that ate everybody else?
Nod. I see. And the woman from the painting. Did you see her?
He's surprisingly mum on that.
Can I roll a P&E on him, actually?
Yeah, he's not really gonna resist because... Eh.
Yeah, exactly. I get just one success.
Considering he's been fairly talkative, I mean, he hasn't been particularly talkative of you at all, but he responds to you, so his lack of response strikes you as a little bit jarring.
Yeah, okay, yeah, definitely.
His eyes just like narrow a little bit at you, but not really into slits. Like it's just again, it's a very jarring body language. It doesn't really fit how the rest of his body is even moving or not moving. It's almost like a bit of a comedic, like a modern comedic sketch where someone just gives you like side eye for no apparent reason or because of some sort of in joke that you didn't get.
And with that side-eye stare, then Garnet will just nod, almost like that's the answer he wanted to hear, almost. He'll just nod to himself. Well, it was nice speaking to you. Thank you for the insight.
Paintings inside a house, not us.
A house under us.
He doesn't murmur, so just roll me quick perception alertness real quick. I'll say
Yeah.
div 5 because
That's legit.
He is murmuring. That was a very quiet murmur, reflected by the fact that I was basically unintelligible.
I got 2. Yeah, I got 2. I got 10.
It's painting is for inside our house, not us, not inside us.
I was like, what?
But that fact seems to annoy him, and
why would it be inside a house?
I'm not a house.
Nods.
Besides, she should stick to her own. If she wanted to stay tied to someone, perhaps she should have been more chatty.
I see. Just nods to himself again. It can happen to most of us.
Can copy us, you can't be us.
Nods again. That is very true. Many try, but none truly understand. I'll leave you to your blanket. Kind of just stand up slowly. You've been like kneeling down in front of him, like on one knee.
You'll with that, both of you kind of sensing the end of your little meet. He will get up and just walk away. He doesn't take the blanket with him. Like, he just gets up and just begins walking in a given direction.
Yeah.
You actually hear him walk around the corner. You can kind of, as he after he walks around the corner, like a few seconds after walking around the corner, you can hear a twisting, a piercing, a twisting, and a sprinkling sound. Like water hitting a surface.
Okay. It's odd. He doesn't try to follow him. No, that seems unwise and quite rude, to be honest. No, Garnet doesn't do that. Doesn't take that chance. But he'll turn.
The strange kind of presence you felt on your head kind of fades from your consciousness. Like, he was here, now he's not here anymore, or maybe he's not meant to be here anymore, or whatever he was meant to do here has ended.
I see. Yeah. Okay. That's odd. Garnet will take a look over at the crowd one more time, just scanning around, and he'll vow to come back here the next night because obviously I have to go because my fat parents are calling me.
No problem.
But he will vow to come back here again and resume the investigations for night 2.
Yep, no problem, dude.
Make his way home.
And you're able to leave unhindered, as no one really seems to be bothered by your presence. And to be honest, people largely seem welcoming to outsiders. Again, a very strange mindset for a time like this. But yes, with Garnet and the Red Man's departure, we can end the scene there. Thank you, Claire, for playing. Thank you, watchers, for watching. We'll see you next time.